right, guys, I want to welcome you back to another episode of Thursday Night Live. Coming from a little different location today. We are actually at Bow River Brewing. Very thankful for them allowing us to be here. Awesome environment, great beer, great food. So very thankful that we can be here tonight. We got a couple awesome more flies for you today. We're kind of sticking with that Bow River theme, so we're going to do a couple more flies that are very applicable to our home waters. Before we get started though, I'm going to introduce you to Josh and Bree. They're going to tell us a little bit about kind of a passion project that they're working on. We're all in supporting it. This is something to clean up our waters, to keep our waters as safe as possible. So I kind of hand it over to Josh. You let us know a little bit about your product, what the plan is with it, how you're funding it. Anything else, any other information you have about it?
All right. So last year I was watching in Instagram and I saw someone for Earth Day. They decided to pick up garbage for the day while they're fishing. I thought, great idea. Why don't we do it for the whole summer instead of just for that one day? So I made a commitment to myself. Anytime I saw a fly line or leader tippet, I would pick it up. Unfortunately, I collected a ton. So my wife Bree came up with an idea we saw when we were down fishing in Idaho for a monofilament recycling bin that we can put at the boat launches. Berkeley fishing products, I guess if you send monofilament down to them, they will recycle it.
Awesome.
No questions asked, you just send it to them and they take care of it. So Bree started a soap company called Be Free Naturals, and we have partnered with Bow River Brewing and made a beer soap.
Nice.
Thought beer soap would be a good way to connect with fishermen and fisherwomen. And so, yeah, all about $3 a bar is going to go to fund our PVC monofilament bins. And hopefully we can get these on our boat launches this summer.
Awesome. Is there any fear that you can't get them to the boat launches? Are you kind of going through some red tape or?
Yeah, we're realizing every boat launch, well not every boat launch, but some are Alberta parks,
right.
Some are City of Calgary, some are privately owned, some are run by leaseholders. So we're kind of working through that right now to solve all those problems.
Gotcha.
But right now we're just trying to raise the money to
keep building them and have lots of boat launches. Are you thinking just Calgary area? Or are you hoping to kind of expand that or have somebody else help you get farther as far as that goes?
We're going to start with Calgary. Yeah. The Bow River is our main focus, and if we can, I think if we get that done, then maybe we'll move down. I know we both love fishing the Old Man. We love fishing the Crow's Nest, and if we can expand it, why not? I mean, it gets garbage off the water.
Yeah. So some people may not know the difference between monofilament, fluorocarbon. What's the dangers with us just leaving? Why can't we just throw it in the water? What's the danger there?
Because it's there forever.
Yeah. So fluorocarbon for sure, right? It's not going to go anywhere. And if Berkeley, if they can do what they're saying they're doing and actually recycling it and making more, that's brilliant. That's awesome. So you're selling your soap here. We can get it anywhere else, or?
Right now here in Iron Bow Fly Shop in Dalhousie.
Yeah.
And then I plan to, as I have more product available, to approach some of the other fly shops in the city as well. So I have an Instagram page, which is listed on the back of the soap, but just _free natural. And then I'll just post kind of more places that the soap will be available as I go along.
Awesome.
But yeah, it's all completely natural. Beer, little apricot exfoliant in there, and a citrus aromatherapy oil, so you won't smell like beer after you use the soap.
Bummer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is it edible?
Yeah.
I haven't tried. You can
be the first. Yeah. Spend your $3 and find out.
See if you get a buzz.
Yeah. Well, guys, that's awesome. Obviously, we're full support. It's we have to keep our waters clean if we're going to be able to continue fishing them. So thank you for what you're doing. Obviously, that's out of the goodness of your heart, and you're committed to yourself. So we'd love to be there and help you in any way we can. So we'll start emptying out our pockets and boats, and that's where they'll be.
Yeah. Awesome. Thanks.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. Thanks for coming out. All right, guys. Well, again, thank you for all of you from home who are tuning in. We're always grateful to have you guys, not just sticking along, but making comments. Any questions you have, just let us know. Well, Dana's back there managing the show. Doesn't get a lot of time on the screen, but he's back there doing all the work. I just get to come up here and have the fun. So if you got questions, don't hesitate to put them through. He'll answer them, or for you guys here, ask questions. This is definitely an open floor. So we again are doing a couple more flies this week that are, the first one here we have is called a Kaufmans stone. It is a little bit more complicated. If you look at it, you might not want to challenge yourself to do it on your own. It is actually quite a simple pattern. So we want to take you through it step by step and hopefully give you some confidence in a few different techniques. And then we're going to go on from there, and we're going to tie what's called a Charlie Boys hopper. Another great fly, very simple, very applicable to our home waters. So a couple of great patterns that we're going to get working on today. So for you guys here, we have your packages that you have in front of you. If you go into the little package, you're going to see a couple of different hooks. One's a curved hook, and one is not. So I'll show you. We're going to tie this first one on a 1270 Daiichi number 6. You can adjust the stone size. You could go bigger. We definitely have some that are bigger than this, and smaller as well. Lots of different sizes you could tie this in. But it is good to tie it on a curved hook. Some guys even like to take wire and bend the hook over to one side or the other. It just gives it almost makes it look like the fly's squirming a bit. If you want to make it look more realistic, I think it's a pretty awesome looking fly regardless of what you tie it on. But that curved hook is kind of a key. It just gives it a little bit more shape to it. Looks a little bit more natural. All right, so if you go ahead and you get that curved hook put in your vise. Oh yeah, sorry. If you guys don't have a package, let me know. If anybody doesn't have one, Troy will get one out to you. So get that in your vise in a good spot. This fly sometimes I'll go in when I start and I'll actually tip my eye down a bit. It makes it a little easier to tying in my biots at the start. If you know me and you know tying, you know how much I love working with biots. It's my absolute favorite material, with as much sarcasm as possible. I don't like them. This fly is actually it's a little bit easier, not only because it's larger, but just the style in which we tie the biots on is easier. So in your package, you're going to have a big chunk of dubbing. So we're going to tie this with some Wapsi Awesome Possum. This is in golden stone. So we're tying this in a golden stone version. You can replicate this in black as well, which is another great color. You can definitely choose your dubbing, I would say, wisely. Sometimes there's certain dubbings that aren't going to work for this. You can't use a dry fly dubbing because we're going to be picking out, we're going to definitely pick out some of those fibers. So you want to have more of like a rabbit fur or synthetic that's something like a possum where there has longer strands in the dubbing so we can pick it out. We're not tying legs into it, so technically we're trying to make that dubbing look like it's legs, okay? So grab a little tiny piece of that dubbing that you have in your hands, a little pinch. We're gonna, actually before we do that, shouldn't forget this. You also are gonna have a little piece of lead wire, lead-free wire. This is 0.03, this size. It's maybe a little beefy for this hook, but we're gonna put a good few wraps on here because we want this to be heavy. We're not putting a bead on the front, so we wanna gain some weight on the fly. So we do wanna leave some space at the back, and we do wanna leave some space at the front as well. So what I do is I'm gonna come in about here. So 2/3 of the way back, I would say. I'm just holding it with one finger to kind of get it started, and I'm just gonna take some wraps. If you find that your wraps didn't get super close together, just pinch them together. We're gonna advance that forward, and I'm gonna leave, probably 3 or 4 hook eye lengths open, or eye lengths be open behind it. Go in there, trim it out. Don't use any good scissors for this, or get, like I have done just right here, get deep into your scissors. It's an area that you don't use a ton when you're doing precise stuff. We're gonna kind of center that right in the middle of that fly. So we just need some space at the back and the front. We're just kind of creating a profile. So as we wrap up and over those lead wraps, it's gonna make a bulkier thorax to the fly. Okay? So then we can go ahead and get our thread started. We're gonna start right behind the eye. We're gonna lay a nice thread base down, kind of crawl up on top of those thread wraps. And we don't want to pull down too hard when we're on those because we don't want our thread to slip into the thread wrap or into the wraps of lead, and then it'll actually force the lead to kind of spread apart. So we want to go as quickly as we can past the lead and almost make a bit of a dam behind it so it can't move. Then we'll come back up on top of it. Just kind of lay a little bit of thread base over top of it. Don't have to cover them up because we're going to do that later. Now we're going to come back quite deep into the bend of this hook. So for me right now, I am going to take and adjust it in my vise just a little. I like to have the eye down a smidge for when I'm doing this next part, and I will readjust it momentarily. If you have any wax with you, I'm going to use it today, and it is kind of important with this specific dubbing that you have a little bit of wax to dab, or you got to wet your fingers and really work that dubbing onto your thread. I am using a little bit heavier thread on this one. I'm using a 140. This is a UTC 140 just in tan color. I'm just going to go put just a couple of dabs. I'm not going to make a very long noodle this time, because what I'm actually doing is I'm going to create a little ball of dubbing right at the back, and I'm going to tie my biots up against it, and it's going to force them to splay out a little bit. So we don't have to be as precise about how we tie them in. They're going to kind of splay naturally against it. So then just take a little pinch of that dubbing. I'm not going to take very much of it. And I'm going to come up and just use my fingers to roll it on. I'm going to roll this very tight. Okay? I want that dubbing to roll on there quite tight, especially with these longer fibers. I'm going to come up and I'm just trying to make a little ball right on the bottom part of that slope of the hook. Okay? Just that little yellow ball we've created, and then advance your thread just ahead of it. Okay, so it's going to kind of look like that. Almost looks like an egg sac sitting back on the back of the fly. Next material we're going to go in for is our biots. And today I'm using like I don't think this package says what color, but it's like a brown or golden stone color. When you open them up, they actually look really awesome. They got kind of different yellow and brown color on the biot. Across a section of biots, if you're up near the top of it, the biots are going to be a lot smaller, and if you're down at the bottom, they're going to be smaller. But if you kind of break it right in the middle, you get the biggest size of biot to use. So that's kind of where, for you guys here, we've kind of selected those ones. If you didn't, you can blame Garnet, because he obviously picked the wrong ones for you.
I just wanted to get it done.
Yeah. So we're going to use 2 biots here at the back. So you go ahead and take off 2. You're probably going to have, we just kind of generally cut, so I would say somewhere between 4, 5, 6. We're going to use 4 on this fly. So as you can see with these biots, there's a natural curve to them. And we want that curve to naturally already splay out away from the fly. So if you look on this one here, kind of at this angle, we have got them to splay outwards. And we're already using the shape of the biot to work for us in that direction. And then by pushing it up against that ball of dubbing, it's going to force it out even more. So I'm going to come in. When I'm measuring this is kind of what I've done for measuring. If I've truly gone to about 2/3 of the hook where I've finished my lead, I want to measure about the length from the back of the lead to the back of the hook, and that's how much biot I want to stick out the back. Okay? That's about roughly how I'm going to measure how much I want to stick out the back. So again, 2/3 back on the hook to the hook bend, that's what I want to hang off the back. And this is a general thing, guys. It's not, you don't have to get super specific. You know, we just want it to hang off and display out. We don't want it to be ridiculously long. We just want it to splay off the back nicely. So kind of how I tie these in is I kind of gauge that distance that I want, and then I go in with my opposite hand, and I'm just going to almost pinch it against the hook. So now I've switched. It's not moving. It's where I want it. I'm going to take a nice loose collecting wrap on that biot. And if you go ahead and spin, like for me right there, I went to wrap, and my thread wanted to move up the fly because I didn't spin it the right way. So if I spin it clockwise, give your bobbin a quick spin, now it's going to stay nice and tight where I want it to, okay? I'm going to put one loose, one a little bit tighter, and then I can let go. And I'm still going to be able to adjust that if I want to. So I can go in there. I think it's out just maybe a little bit too much, so I'm going to just pull that tag end a bit. I kind of like where it is now. Advance my thread up, lock that biot down. You got to be really gentle with these biots, because if you go right down against that ball of dubbing that we've put, it'll actually splay it too much. It'll just pinch it and it'll send it straight, almost at a 90-degree angle out. So I'm happy with that angle. I didn't go all the way up to that ball that I created with the dubbing. I'm going to grab my other biot, and I'm just going to repeat the process again, so again, I have my natural curve. I know I want that curve to go out away from the fly. So I'm going to come in, and this time I really want to measure to make sure it's the same length as the other side. So when I'm happy with it, I like the length, again, I'm going to come and just pinch it against the hook. Take a nice loose collecting wrap, take a second one that's a little tighter, and then I step back and look. For that one, for me, it worked perfectly. It splayed just the way I wanted it to. It looks good. They're the same length, roughly anyways. Now I can advance my thread forward and lock that butt end of the bite in almost up to where that lead wrap is. And then I want to go in and cut it out. So I can cut the butts of those out now. Good, so if you've done that semi-appropriately, it's going to look something like that. Okay? Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to butt my thread right up against where I finished with that thread wrap. Finished with that lead wrap. The last lead wrap, you're going to see you have, where's Troy? How do you say this stuff again? No, that ribbing stuff. Vinyl rib. Swanadays. That's the word I couldn't think of. So vinyl rib or Swanadays, I can't tell you the difference at the moment. I know that some of them are shaped a little bit differently. This is Swanadays, and it does sit flatter, which I like when I'm wrapping this up. So some vinyl rib is more round, and it takes up a little bit more bulk and space, whereas this one will actually lay flat. So I want to go in right behind where I laid that last lead wrap, and I'm going to tie that Swanadays in right there. So all we're doing is we're filling in that space, and we're going to almost level out the angle of that body and that taper by putting it in there. Okay? So I'm going to put some thread wraps, make sure it's good and tight. Again, I'm going to push down right to about where I finished on those biots. That stuff's going to probably kind of be in your way a little bit if you've got a place for a material clip or something. Try to get it out of the way if you can. The next material we're going to go in with is we're going to go back to our dubbing again. So I'm going to readjust this in my vise just a little bit. So we want to go up now. We're going to leave about a third of the fly at the front for the thorax. Okay, so we're going to, as you can see from this one here, we're using this, we use a thin skin material I'll show you how to kind of cut it out. But we're using that thin skin material. It's going to hang back over the body a little bit. So we're going to work up quite a way. So I'm going to go 2/3 of the length of the hook up and leave about a third for that thorax that we're going to work on at the end. Okay, things get a little crowded up at the top end of the fly, but it's kind of the most realistic look we can get. So I'm right here. I'm going to go back and use my wax again if you have it. If not, wet your fingers. Make sure. There's going to be times in this fly where we wrap the dubbing quite light and we keep it fluffy, and there's going to be times that we really want to rope it up. And this is an instance where we're going to rope it up pretty good. I'm going to give myself about 5 inches that I'm going to be working with here. So I want to put enough dubbing on all the way down. If it's a little, we want this dubbing noodle to be fairly symmetrical, but if you got parts that are a little bit bulkier than others, it's okay, because we can, once we start to wrap it on, we're going to see how the taper on the fly looks, and we'll just adjust accordingly as needed. So all I'm doing is kind of taking that action with my fingers, and I'm just almost like I'm playing a tiny violin. I'm just going to roll that onto that thread. Okay, so now I'm going to kind of hold that Swanadays out of the way. Now I just want to say that word continuously. And I'm going to start right behind those biots, okay? And the goal is that we make a pretty even tapered look. So as soon as we step up onto those lead wraps, it's going to obviously look bigger, which is okay because we're building that taper in the body. We just want it to look nice and smooth, okay? And I can tell right now I came a little short. I didn't quite make it as far as I wanted with that 5 inches of dubbing noodle. So I'm going to go ahead and add a little bit more. It's always easier to add than it is to take it off. So we're going to go in, just add a little bit more dubbing to that noodle. It is pretty easy to overdo it with the dubbing, but we also want enough to build up to this thorax. So Be careful to try to keep as much wax off your fingers as possible. So I've just kind of done about another 2.5 inches worth. Just wanting to keep that looking nice and nice smooth taper. So you can see that there's no bulges in that body at any point. Just kind of tells me I've kept a pretty even taper. And now I get to here and I can tell, yeah, I'm about 2/3, so I might add just a little bit right there. It's going to look like a little bit more of a bump. And I'll kind of show you why it looks that way in a second. And if you have any little stragglers at this point, just go ahead and just trim them out. We don't actually want to brush this part out. We're going to brush some more of this dubbing out as far as we go up. So if you got any stray fibers, because it is quite a long fibered dubbing that we're using this time, just get some of them out of the way. So this fly, guys, the heavier you tie it, obviously the deeper in the water column you can fish it without adding weight. This, as I tie it today on this size of the hook with this size of lead wire, it is very doable even to fish as a dropper underneath a hopper of some kind. A great example would be the hopper we're going to tie next. So it's not super heavy, not super light, but it is going to dive in that water column quite nicely and get down. Because of that angle that the body is, it's going to move a lot in the water too. I mean, you almost think of like a 5 diamond. The shape that it has is a little bit concave the same. So it's just going to spiral or move or toss in the water column. Hopefully look pretty realistic. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to grab our Schwannadays and we are going to start wrapping it forward. So just, we're not wanting touching wraps at all. We want a nice open wrap, open spiral as we come up and pull pretty hard. We want it to dig into that dubbing, create a nice segmented look as we go forward. But I'm doing a nice open wrap all the way up till I get to my thread. And then I want to take a couple thread wraps in front, a couple behind. Make sure that it's nice and secure before I cut it. Otherwise, we've really kind of ruined the fly. We're going to have to take off all the dubbing to get back to the start again. So make sure you secure it quite nicely. Then you can snip it out, set it aside. Just make sure she's nice and secure. So the next material that we're going to work with tonight. So this pattern traditionally it's tied with it could be tied with a couple of different materials. We're going to use the thin skin material tonight, but it is actually first tied with most of the time it's turkey. It's a turkey feather that you're using some of the fibers. You cut them. It's a little bit more of a process because you're supposed to hairspray them so they all stick together. So when you cut them, the fibers don't fall apart. This is a synthetic material. It comes on these long cards. So the pieces I've cut out for you, I've just cut a strip out. They're not necessarily the right width, so I'm going to talk to you about kind of how we gauge the width that we want to trim it. And then even more technically, we got to get into cutting the shape that we want. So if you look on this fly, you can see it almost looks like an arrow. Well, it's kind of covered up at the moment, but I'll uncover that back one. It almost looks like an arrow in that back piece right here. Okay, so I'm going to show you how to kind of cut this. It looks kind of like the fletching of an arrow on one side and we taper it to a point on the other so that we're able to tie it in. The one mistake that even I've made when I've tied this sometimes, if I leave the strip too wide and I tie it in and I haven't tapered it properly, all it wants to do is round like this and fold, and then it almost takes all that material and controls it too much. We want this to look buggy so we can comb it out so it kind of looks bushy like legs. So if I take this and I set it on top of my fly, right now I want to look at, it's going to be roughly the hook gap in width is what the width that I'm gonna trim this at. If yours is a little wider than that, then go ahead and just trim the full length of it down. I'm gonna take this piece as it started, so it's got a white card on it. So let's try to leave that on it. It's not like a sticker, so it doesn't come off and it's sticky. It's like a vinyl material. So when we pull it off, you're not gonna get it back on there, but it's easier to trim with that white stuff on the back. So I'm gonna come in and I'm just gonna trim about the width that I want, all the way down. And some of this is just honestly takes a bit of trial and error to find kind of that width that you like to work with. I would caution a little bit on the side of, so if I turn this to you, I would caution a little bit on the side of thin over too wide, because we don't want it to take all the kind of the dynamic of this fly away and how it shapes it. One second here. Okay, so this thin skin, like I said, we want to kind of create this shape of this V at the back of it. So we're going to come in on one end, and we're actually just going to cut a snip and a snip, and that's going to allow us to kind of get that shape initially, and then I'll show you how we taper it. So if I'm here, I'll try to do this while looking in here. So if I come into the tip of this, I'm never going to be able to do this. So I'll cut it, and then I'll show you what it looks like. So I just come in. Too much hot sauce, yeah. That's the shape that I want on the end. So I'm just cutting a little notch out of it. And then I'm going to come down, I would say, oh man, just a few centimeters down from that. So I'm going to go ahead and cut right about there. Okay, so if you're looking at it, I would say that's maybe, again, a third of the length of the hook. And so now what I'm left with is that. And it's just a straight out the back shape like this. Well, what I want to do is I want to actually have a point down at this end that I can have to purchase them when I tie in. So how I'm going to trim that piece, I'll trim it and show you here. So it's in the shape of a point. This stuff is kind of a funny material, but we use it on a lot of nymphs, and once you get good at working with it, it's pretty awesome stuff. So now if you look at that, it's got a point on this end. So I've trimmed that down to a point, and on this end is my notch. Does that make sense? So notch on the one side, and I've trimmed that down to a point in the middle on the other side. And the reason is I want to tie in that point piece, okay? So now it's a little bit of a fun task to get that white paper off the back. I always use my scissors. I come in and I just kind of pick at it a little bit until I get it separate. Once it starts to separate, it looks like so. It's going to come off the back of that white paper. Try not to drop it or lose it because you've done a nice job of cutting it now. So what I'm trying to achieve here, if you look on the back of this fly, I'm trying to achieve 3 segmentations. So I'm going to do this 3 different times. You're going to have to cut this nasty stuff 2 more times after this. Now we're just kind of creating that body armor shell that's on the back of the stonefly. That's what we're trying to imitate with this material. So this first one, I'm going to set on here. I'm going to tie it in, and I'm going to show you what it looks like and how far I wanted it back. So I just kind of come in and I set it on top. I adjust it back a little bit to where I think it's going to be about right. I think I like it there. So when you're tying this stuff in, I'm just going to take a nice loose collecting wrap, take another wrap, and then cinch down. Make sure you got some good thread wraps over top of it. We're gonna take thread wraps right up against to where we left our dubbing. So now if I turn that over so you can see it, it's just sitting like that. I've pretty much only exposed that up to that notch and a little bit more is what I've exposed on there. And that's going to be the back piece of armor. Okay? So what I've been liking to do as I go is I'm just going to touch this with, I'm using a Fly Tire Cement, a super glue, even a head cement's fine at this point. I would stay away from the UV because it's slippery, so your thread wraps won't want to come back up on top of it. I'm just touching it a little bit so those thread wraps don't move, and that piece is secured in there. It's not going to go anywhere. Okay, now let's start the task. Let's go ahead and cut the next one while we're kind of in the groove. So I want you to cut 2 more right while we're doing this. It's good to do them back to back because you kind of get comfortable with how you do it, and then we'll move forward from there. So I'm going to cut them exactly the same as I did the previous one. If we have to make adjustments to the overall length at the end when we tie the last one in, we can do that as well. But we don't need to do that right this second. Get your notches clipped in there. And then trim down that point on the front. You got to be quite precise, and it's kind of a small material to hold in your hands to work with. So it definitely takes a little bit of getting used to. But once you kind of get used to it, it's pretty fun. We use it on a lot of different nymph patterns, or we use it as a flashback, or we use it as that thorax to make quite a realistic back of a body. Tie a lot of scuds with this same type of material.
Tim, after that notch that you do,
Yeah.
that last cut on there,
Yeah.
what was that called again? Or can you show it?
Yeah, absolutely. So when it's done, it basically looks like an arrow. Okay, so I've tied, 1 second here, we'll get the other camera up, there you go. So it almost looks like an arrow. So I got my notch over here on this side, and I've got a point like an arrow on this side. And that point is what we're going to tie in. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Okay. Again, guys at home, if you got any questions, got to let us know. We don't know if you don't say anything. So go ahead and leave the white back on that one just for now, because we're gonna put in some dubbing before we come back to this. Did you take it off already? Of course you did. I should have preempted with that. It's all right.
That instruction
That's all right. You'll survive. Okay. And we can set those aside. So this pattern, guys, this is we fish a lot simpler looking patterns than this on the bow all the time. Classic example of a stonefly we fish is a jimmy legs. You can't get more simple than that. A little bit of chenille, again, some lead wraps, and some rubber legs. We don't even attempt to make this look realistic. So some people may ask, well, what's the point? Well, the point is we get to work on our skills on the vise, and there's going to be days when fish are picky. And if it's not working, it's good to have like 3 or 4 decent stonefly nymphs in your arsenal. You can pull out and try. And in a couple of different colors and a couple of different sizes. That sounds overwhelming to have that many flies, but you don't need to have 20 of each. If you have 5 or 6 or 7 of each is great, right? So it's always good to tie some different patterns and good techniques to learn and to work with different materials. So next thing we're going to do here, we are this time not going to use our wax. We're going to go back to our dubbing again and grab a decent pinch. Not too big, I would say just a little, it's a small pinch. And this time, we're not going to really even want to wet our fingers too much. We don't want to put too much pressure on this one. We want to leave it a little bit fluffier because we're going to wrap up and it's going to extend a little bit over that armor that we just put on there. So I'm going to just kind of loosely put it on. I wouldn't go any tighter than that on your dubbing noodle. And we don't need a ton this time. I'm not going crazy with the dubbing. So then I'm going to make sure that my thread is right at the back of where I tied this piece of thin skin in. I'm going to start my wraps, and I'm going to almost be wrapping up against it. So I want to get a couple of thread wraps almost built up against itself, like so. And then I'm going to come back to in front of where I tied it in and finish it right there. So I've just kind of created this bump in front of it. And if you look at the top side of it, you've got I've got a little bit of exposed. Like, we're not trying to show that entire piece we tied in. We just want to show the notch and a little bit more. So what I've done there is I've created a pretty good ball of dubbing, and we left it loose so that we can go in after and pick it out with some Velcro because we want to, again, try to achieve the look of that leg. So next one we're going to go in with here, guys, we're going to grab our next piece of thin skin. So go in, use your scissors to get the back of it off, and we're going to tie this one in just like we did the last one. So again, I'm just going to come in on top. I'm just going to set it down. And I'm going to use the point of my finger to just kind of reference where I want it. I don't want these to be necessarily overlapping, but if you look at this angle right there, the points of the back of my fletching of my arrow, let's say, are extending slightly over the first one. Okay, does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Just slightly extending over, so I'm exposing a little bit of that yellow dubbing underneath, and I'll switch my fingers back over, and all I'm doing is just a little bit of pressure on top, and then I can go again and tie that in. So a nice loose collecting wrap. Push some thread wraps up against it. Here we go. And kind of as we're building that bulk up towards the very head of the fly, it's just making that thorax look bigger and bigger, which we have a lot more. Like, the thorax on a stonefly has legs coming out of it, and it has this armor on the back, and it makes it look a lot bigger. So we want it to look significantly larger up at the head of the fly versus the rear end of the fly. Okay, so we're going to take a couple more thread wraps just to secure that down. And I'm going to go again and just touch it with my super glue. And we're actually going to get back to those biots right quick. We're going to go back to the front biots before we tie in anything else, because we don't want to lose the room that we've got right now to work on them. So let's go back. Let's grab those biots. We're going to, again, use 2 more. If for some reason you guys are short, let me know. We'll get a couple out to you. So let's grab 2 more biots. And these ones we're going to tie in a little different than we did the back ones. We're not going to use that dubbing ball to splay them out. we're actually going to tie them on almost flat on top of the hook eye. They're going to extend over top of the hook eye. They're going to almost be in the way until you put thread through it, which is going to then kind of open up that hook eye to allow you to get thread through. So if you look at this one here, I'll show you again. I've actually almost tied them in flat. So instead of having that curve go to one side or the other, I'm having that curve come up and swoop upwards. So I'm tying it right on top of the hook. So if I look at it from the side, sorry, I tried to change this in my hand. They actually have a little bit of that rise coming off the front, okay? So when I go in, I want one to tie at a bit of an angle so it comes off one side of the fly and one to come off the other. And we want to kind of maintain that same shape that we did off the back of the fly. So I'm going to advance my thread forward to just behind the eye. Just going to use my finger to keep pressure. And I want to use about the same distance extending off the front of the fly as I did off the back of the fly. So you can use the back ones as a gauge to kind of eyeball. I come in and I adjust it a little bit to where I like it, maybe a little bit more. But remember, I'm going to take that nice loose wrap. Next one's a little bit heavier. And while I have it there, I can adjust it, okay? So I can move it around a little bit to kind of attain that shape that I want. Once I get to where I like it, then I extend my thread back and secure the butt end section. That way it's not going to move on me anymore. Okay, so I've got that first one. I kind of like the angle I have it at, so I secured it down. Now I'm going to go in with the second one and do the exact same thing. And this time it's going to come off from the other side. And again, pair up and match the distance that it comes off the fly. Nice loose wrap, a little bit heavier one. I might adjust this one a little bit. I like the way it's splayed there for me, so I go and secure the butts and cinch them down. Then I'm just going to go in and trim out those butts, trying to stay away from that thin skin if I can. I don't want to create too steep of ramp because it's going to kind of bugger up my next set of dubbing because I still have one more piece of armor to tie in. So when I go back up to where I tied in that thin skin, I'm going to again go in, loosely put on another piece of dubbing. Just loosely make a nice little dubbing noodle like we did the first time. Might be a little bit much. It is always easier to add than it is to take it off. So I'm going to come up and I'm going to kind of put some wraps up again because I'm going to go once over top of myself so that I make sure I'm covering up the majority of that armor, then come back in front. Finish off the use of what I had there. And I don't quite like it. I should have gone a little bit tighter with my dubbing. So I'm just going to tighten it up just a smidge and go back in and use it up. So I've got a little bit of a bump there, but I'm going to cover that up with the next piece of body armor. Okay? So now I want to go in and grab that last piece of body armor. We got one more section to go. And then 3 total. 3 total. I mean, if you want to be ambitious and tie 4, give her. But 3 is more than enough. So you guys at home, if you're tuning in from somewhere interesting or farther away than we are, let us know. We always like to give a shout out if you're somewhere else in the world, and we find it pretty cool when people are tuning in from all over. Last couple of weeks we've had some people from kind of all over the place. So let us know if you're tuning in from somewhere far away. We'd like to give you a shout out. So last one, we're going to come in, same thing, we're going to set it down, and we want pretty much even spacing on every single one of these. So if I look at my last 2, I want to basically mimic it so it looks as close to the same as possible. Get that loose collecting wrap, make sure it's sitting where I want it. I like that a lot, sat perfectly. I'm going to go in and touch again one more time with some super glue so none of that moves. And then all I got to do, guys, is put on one more little piece of dubbing and I can brush it out, and that's the completion of that fly. I know this one's a little fidgety, but once you get kind of used to it and you're tying a little bit more often, it actually does go pretty quick. You probably spin one out in about 5-6 minutes once you're quicker at it. And if you prep your materials, because this thin skin I'll give you takes quite a while to tie in and to trim and get to the right size. So now that I got that little bit of super glue on there, Let it dry just a smidge. And now I'm gonna go in for that last bit of dubbing. Another nice little short dubbing noodle. We want to be about the same amount we put on last time. Again, not too tight. This will finish off the fly, so we want enough dubbing to go from the back of that thin skin right up to against the eye. Obviously not crowding it too much so we can still get a whip finish in there. So I'm gonna come in. Good. Once you get up to your eye, then go ahead and whip finish it off. Make sure that knot is seated well. This would be a real bummer to lose this at this point. You guys got any questions about how to segment those pieces together? Is it okay for people? I know it's a little bit finicky. Once we got it in there and we like where it's sitting, I'm going to go in and just touch just those the underside thread wraps with a little bit of super glue. Might be a little thick there on the dubbing case. I shouldn't have given him half the package. Yeah, apparently he just believes you got to use all the material in the package. Yeah, stretch it out. That front noodle should be about an inch, not 8. Perfect, guys. So this is what we got right now. So it looks a little different than what that finished one looked like that I showed you. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to go in there. I just have this little piece of Velcro tool, like whatever you have, even a bodkin works to go in and pick some of that out. But all I'm going to do is I'm going to go just do a little bit of picking. But I only want to stay up here on that thorax. I don't want to go down too far. You could pick some of this out from this vinyl rib, but I don't, oh sorry, Schwanna days. But I don't want to go down that far. So I'm just going to pick out a little bit. Schwanna days? Schwanna days. Schwanna days. Schwanna days. Schwanna days. If you don't know what it is, welcome to the club. Schwan more days. Yeah, shawarma. All right, so all I've done is pick that out, guys. So what we're trying to imitate there is just that to be our legs. Now what I would say is a little bit of a variation of this pattern that would be quite simple to do is every time we finish tying in the thin skin, add a set of rubber legs to each side. If you did that each time, you're going to have them pointed rearward. Still use the bites up front, up back, and at the back, but tie in a section of legs. So you got 3 sets of legs at the end. That would look even more realistic than this is. But this is probably as realistic as you need to get. It looks super buggy. The dubbing is quite stiff, so it keeps a lot of shape and this look of legs underneath the, underneath the stonefly. All right, guys, that is our Kaufmans Schwanna Day stonefly. No, Kaufman stonefly. Awesome pattern. I hope this encourages you to add it to your arsenal because it is a doable fly to tie.
For me, fly fishing is one of my biggest
Any last minute
passions.
questions on this one before we head on to the next pattern?
Guys are very, they don't want to hold hands or all that kind of stuff, but just be in a position so that if he needs to lean on you, he can do it.
Yeah, grab a beer, guys.
It's always good practice when the guys sit up. Keep braced, guys, right? Yeah. Stay in the braces, stay square on the boat. And then get them pumped for this next run. So get us pumped.
Yeah, so when I first came in, the fishing was like, I thought it was all about that. No, that's not the case, which is great, right? That's probably the biggest takeaway I got was the people experience.
It's a compliment. Okay, guys, let's get on to the next one. Apparently I'm going through puberty around 3. My voice won't stop cracking. I think Brandon needs to give me some of his water. None left? Oh, I guess you'll have to go fill it up. Okay, so our next pattern we're gonna head on to, don't worry guys, you have time to grab your beer. We'll talk about it a little bit. So when it comes to hopper patterns, we have a few things that we really look for. And a lot of times we get super technical on what this bug looks like how realistic can we get it to look like an actual grasshopper? How much does that matter to a fish? I can't totally answer that for you, but the one thing that I do know makes a difference is size, profile, and color. Okay, so whether it has glued on realistic 3D eyes, I don't know if that makes a difference to them. But what does matter is the fact that it's the right color, which might be the right color for the day. So we have different colored hoppers on the Bow River. We got greens, some that are more yellow, and a lot of tan ones. Today we're tying in tan. So color matters hugely. Matters maybe that day for sure. Size matters. Sometimes we tie really big ones. This would be maybe medium to smaller sized hopper that we would fish. I would say even more importantly than all those things though is the profile and how it sits on the water. So we want a fly that's going to sit sometimes maybe a little lower, a little higher, but what's important is the bottom of the fly is visible to the fish. If it sat up too high in the water, it wouldn't be as visible. Also, on this specific fly, we're using material that's called, this stuff is called web wing. Again, this is just to look like, it's meant to look like wings. So it looks like a grasshopper's wings that are sitting back on its body. So if you look at this hopper the way we've tied it right now, you can see it extends just slightly out either direction of the foam. So it's a little wider than the hopper, and it sits back even farther. It looks like a set of wings. So these are little things that we know the fish can see when they're looking up, right? We can't tell you if they can see an eyeball, but we can tell you they definitely see the underside of a fly. So really important piece is, again, size, color, and profile. If we can kind of meet those three things, again, what's on top of the water, I don't think is as crucial, right? What's up top, what matters is what they can see when they look up. So some key things to remember. This is called a Charlie Boys, thank you so much, Greg, a Charlie Boys hopper. This was created basically to simplify what a pattern can look like, but meet all those functional tips that I just told you. So we want it to look as realistic as possible, be simple to tie, and doesn't need 1,000 materials. This is very, very simple. We got deer hair, we got this web wing, we got some foam. That's about it. I'm also going to show you at the end how to tie an indicator color into this so that it's more visible for you as another option. But just such a simple pattern, guys. So we're going to get started on it. If you go into the rest of the material that you had there, we are going to, this time we're actually tying this on a size 6, 3XL long dry fly hook from Mustad. So this isn't a super huge hook, not super long, but a good kind of all around hopper size. So get that secured in your vise. We're going to go ahead and start our thread up at the eye. And thread color here, guys, actually can make a difference in how this fly looks. So my thread actually makes the segmentation. So therefore, the color of the segmentation is derived from the color of the thread. So today I'm going to use, again, I'm going to go with a 140. Important to use 140 when we're using foam, at least a 140 or a 3/0, because we need to be able to cinch down on that foam. And if the thread is too thin, it'll cut through the foam. So we need a little bit bigger thread when working with this stuff. And I'm going to go ahead and use brown today, just so you get a little bit of a different look to it. Let's go ahead, lay a thread base down to the bend of the hook. Right into the bend. We'll work our way back up to behind the eye. So you've got a pretty big chunk of foam, not quite as big as the one I have here, but you have a very wide chunk of foam. When we actually end up cutting this foam, we're going to measure it off the gap of the hook. So the hook gap is the width that we're going to cut the foam, okay? So you guys all have quite a wide piece. What I want you to do is go and just trim a little piece down the side, really super thin and about the length of your hook. Okay, so what I'm left with is just this little tiny piece. It's quite thin, a little bit wider than the hook. And what we're going to do is we're going to take this little piece of foam, we're going to tie it on top of the hook, and the only reason it's there is to gain some purchase. We want to be able to fold this foam back, and we're actually going to glue a couple of pieces of foam together. So we need this to assist us in just keeping the foam aligned on top of the hook. So I'm just going to go in, start a little bit behind the eye, about a hook length behind the eye, and just open spiral wraps. I don't want to cinch this foam down all the way. I want to leave a little bit of that bulk. That's what's working to my advantage. When I get to the end, I'll do a nice cinch and just pull that piece off. Okay? We're gonna go back to that foam now, guys. And that full length, so this is, I'm not even gonna pretend to be able to guess. That's probably 4 inches, I'm gonna guess. Yeah, it's a dangerous game to play. Is it 4 inches? I think it looks, maybe it's 6. Yeah. Is my wife on? Crap. Okay, before I dig too big a hole here, we're gonna use that full length. So what we're actually doing is we're gonna punch a hole through the foam with our hook. It's gonna sit like about so. We're gonna punch it through the eye and fold it back. So I need to know that I've got that full length so that I'm gonna get all the way back down the hook. That's why we're using that full 6 inches. So we're gonna cut a strip off of this, off of your foam. So I'm gonna go down and I'm going to, kind of an easy way of doing it is pushing it up against your hook until the point of your hook jabs into the foam, and that's a good marker for me. Now I'm gonna cut that foam just inside where that hook mark was made. Okay, so if I look at that, I see where my hook made a mark. I'm gonna cut it just a hair thinner than where that hook is, okay? And we're gonna try to keep as straight of cut down the foam as we can. And again, we're gonna need to use all of that. As I'm talking here, guys, I'm gonna pass around a patch of deer hair. I want you to take off a clump, okay? We're talking about take a generous pencil width. I'll kind of tell you how to measure and thin that out if need be, but you need a chunk of deer hair. So I'm gonna pass this around as we go, and I'm continuing to talk. Just cut a piece off, okay? I actually have another piece here, so I'll send this one in the other direction. Yeah, thanks, Ryan. Yeah, that one is not just for you, buddy. Yeah. Okay, so it's a little easier now to gauge. Now this piece of foam is a little smaller. I want to leave a little bit hanging off the back. I want to kind of bend it over the hook, and I can tell there, yep, I'm going to get all the way down the length of the hook. So kind of eyeball where that's sitting. I'm going to take my hook out of my vise with my thread still attached. And all I'm going to do is I'm going to take it and I'm going to poke right in the dead center of that foam. Right there, okay? Poke it through. So it's going to kind of look like this. It's kind of funky. You're going to have your thread or your foam's going to hang out in a weird way. Go ahead, reaffix your hook in your vise and kind of swing it underneath the fly. So your thread over here is kind of just bonking it all the way. It's going to want to look like it's twisting that foam, but that's okay for now, okay? So what we're going to do is we're going to come underneath it like this. Now I'm going to take just a little bit of a tug here, not much, and I'm going to push the eye of the hook through the foam. So I lift that foam, and I push that eye through, just enough for it to pop through, okay? So I want that foam to stay up nice and close to that eye. So when I'm done popping that through, and if I laid it down, it would look like so. It should pop right through that eye, no problem, if you fold it back over. Does that make sense? Okay. So at this point, what we do need to do is we need to have, you guys need me to explain that again real quick? Okay. So I'll start again. So I took it out of my vise. All I did was poke it right through the middle, right near the back of the foam, just leaving a little bit of a tail off. Go ahead, get it back in your vise. I'm going to swivel that around so the long part comes forward. Now I'm just going to take a little tug on it, not much pressure, but then lift it and push that eye through the foam and then fold it back over itself. Okay? So imagining that when we actually start to take wraps up this foam, it's gonna segment on a doubled over foam because we want it to be thicker. That way it's gonna float even better. Another reason that I'm using a dry fly hook today and not a streamer hook is just it's the floatability of it. We want it to stay up on top of the water. Okay? So what I'm gonna do at this point, guys, and I will pass mine around if you don't have some. It's pretty important that you have a pretty strong super glue. And don't overdo it on the super glue because once you sandwich it down, then all the glue just runs out. So all we're going to do is put a little coating of super glue on the bottom and just a little bit up the bend because up the bend is where it's going to fold over on itself and we really want that part to stay down. Okay? So I'm going to use mine here quick and I can pass this around. So Just remember, don't overdo it. Just a nice light coating. Make sure you get the hook itself and then down kind of the edges of the hook on that foam. And then right in that bend, get a little bit more.
Slow down, I've got some explaining.
Okay, explain away. Who needs some super glue? Yeah? So before that super glue dries, so for myself, I got to do this right now. I'm going to fold that back over itself. Now guys, this is important, so just take a quick look here. Before I squeeze down the back of it, I want to create a little bit of a bend coming off the top. So I'm going to pinch it like so that that butt end takes an angle upward. And I'll show you why that's important once this dries. Okay?
That right to the end?
I glued it right to the end. Just don't overdo it, just a nice light coating. So by pinching that tail up like that, I'm creating a little bit different angle. Okay? And it's all right if your foam's not perfectly lined up. When we trim this up, it's going to look just fine. Don't get caught up in the details of this one. It's really just folding it back over itself, making sure it's glued down. And as we advance with our thread wraps, we're going to cinch it down and it's not going to move anywhere. Okay? Okay. Now one other little piece here is that we're going to need a razor blade. Sorry. Yeah, I'm passing mine around. I think it's making its way.
Anybody else need glue?
If you need a quick help with glue, don't hesitate to ask, guys. We got lots of people here to help. Again, guys at home, I know it's a little tougher. I'm trying to explain to the guys here, but if you have questions, don't hesitate. Let us know if you want me to re-explain something.
That's all Dana has to do is answer questions.
Yeah, that's all Dana's doing.
Confidence in the
Does anybody have a razor blade? Yeah? Okay, if you've got a razor blade, you're going to need one. I'm going to pass around these ones. Troy, do you mind handing these out for me? So if you fold them over, they'll break. Whoop. Just going to fold it, break it, and then you can give out one of each. I got a couple more here, I think. And then at least one between the two of you and your partner. No, mine's over there.
What's yours? Which one?
The full one? Yeah, that stuff's not cheap. A Zap-A-Gap's good, but yeah, you're right, not cheap. So guys, besides the fact that we're in a new location today, it's kind of a new scenery. Again, we want to thank the to be here, but at the same time, it so fits into what we're about. You know, from the decor here to the fact that we share a very similar name with Fly Fishing Boat Outfitters. Such a cool spot. Some of the features that we have here, besides great beer, is we got food too, and that's not always the case with breweries. So I know for us tonight, that was awesome. We were able to come in and eat before we did this. Great wings, great pizza, fries, it all. It's awesome. We might even convince these guys to let us name a beer for them. We'll see. But we'll see about that. But come check it out, guys. As long as it's not whitefish. That'd be a good pale ale. But we'll see. Yeah, yeah. Bow River Bones. That better be on there somewhere. Yeah. So again, guys, to you guys here, thank you so much. We really do appreciate you allowing us to be here, and it's been great. We're looking forward to hopefully coming back. I hope everybody's pretty much caught up. If not, okay. So we're gonna go in with this razor blade, guys. So be very careful. They are not dull, especially when they come fresh out of a package. I like to break them in half. I find them easier to use, and then you can only cut yourself on one side, not both. All we're gonna do is we're gonna slide this razor blade down at this same angle. So I'm coming down that foam. I'm just gonna hold on to the foam a little bit on that kind of upward angle. And as soon as you start to feel resistance, because it's that upturn angle on the foam, just start to kind of saw it. So now if you look at it, we've got this cool little shape on the back. Okay? And we're gonna trim it one more time once we all kind of get to this point. And that's why that, even on mine, you see I didn't line them up perfectly. When I sandwich them together, it's totally fine because how we trim this is going to look just fine. So then we're going to go in there with our scissors, and what we're going to do is we're going to try to do this from this angle, is we're just going to kind of point our scissors towards the middle point of that tail. We're just trying to slender up that tail, the tail portion of the body. So I'm going to take a little snip. You can do it to each side. Now I've created a little bit thinner profile. You can come in there. You could even round that off because it's still a little bit straight. You don't have to make it look perfect, but we just kind of create a little bit different look. Okay? But what's kind of important is on the back of a grasshopper, that's the profile we have. We have a little bit of an upturn in the body, and we're kind of thinning it out. I'm going to thin mine just a little bit more. Just trying to create a slender look at the back end. Because once we start wrapping and doing thread wraps on our foam as we move forward, it obviously rounds and sucks that foam around the hook, so it looks more round. So we don't want to.
Can you show us the top profile?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so I've just thinned it out a little bit. Okay. So where my thread is sitting right now is almost perfectly on where the barb of the hook is. That's where we're going to take our first thread wraps. Okay? So I'm going to come. This should be fairly, I mean, it'll move and rotate on that hook, but it's glued in there pretty good, so it should be a little tougher to move around. I want to come in. I'm going to do a nice loose wrap, so I'm not putting any pressure on that. Now I want to make a second one, all the way around again. Now my thread's below it. I'm going to come in and pinch on that foam and then snug it down. Okay, so I rounded that out, sucked it right in. I'm going to take, because I want to actually use the color of my thread here to accent the bottom of the fly, I'm going to take a few thread wraps. I'm not going to be shy about it. This is probably one of the old times you'll hear us say that it doesn't matter how many wraps you put on it. Build up a little bit of a color there, because when we're done and we flip it over, we'll be able to see that difference in color if you're using a different color thread. So now I want to take and portion off. If I look at this, if I look at my fly from here on, how many segments of this body can I create? If I make them too big, what I can probably do is still get it to look like 3 segments. So that would be one here, one here. I could maybe go one more, but then the head would look really small. So what I like to do is I kind of just like to ballpark it a little bit. So when I start, how I make it look like there's no thread wraps crossing on the bottom is I always do my crossing on top. So what that looks like is if I'm here, I come and I make a half of an X. Okay? So I've made half of an X over, and that's where I'm going to bind. So you see what I did? I made half of an X on top there. So I come across, that creates an X, or half of an X, and I come back over. So on the bottom of the fly, you couldn't tell that I advanced my thread at all. It's just going to look like another body segment. Okay?
And how many segments are we?
We're looking for at least 3 more to be formed. I would like to see 4, so I'm probably going to go a little smaller on mine and see if I can do it. So that's 1, 2. So plenty of room. That one's a little smaller. It's okay. Come back up, split the last one in half. And so every time, as you see on top, I did half of an X to advance my thread, and I never show that on the bottom. It's important that we don't. That doesn't look natural. And now I take a few thread wraps up top. So now I've got, on that one, you see at first I thought maybe I've only got 3, but it was easily enough for 4. So I've advanced myself forward. And now if you look at the top, it even looks, because of the way we folded over that foam, and now I put thread wraps in there to suction it down, it actually almost creates the shape of a hopper's head. It's got a triangular shape at the front because it's staying the full width of the foam right at the eye, and then we sucked it in just behind. So it looks very realistic. Okay? So what we're going to do here now, we're going to go in and we're going to find that webbing, that, what do they call this stuff? Web wing. So we're going to try to imitate what it looks like for a grasshopper's wings laying down on its body. Okay? So when I go to measure that piece that you have there, so I'll cut myself a little piece that looks similar to yours. If if I go and lay that down on top of there, I basically want that to extend even wider than the body of the fly by just a little bit. And I just want that profile to be seen. It's going to give a little bit of a sheen. It's going to be like sparkly when they look up at it. So I want it to be a little wider. This is still too wide. Okay, that's still a little bit too wide. And I want it to extend off the back of the fly just enough to be seen as well. But this is too wide, so I'm going to go back in and I'm going to trim it a little bit more. So you kind of gotta gauge it off. However big your segments look, is how you're going to gauge what this looks like. So I'll go back in, lay it on top again. I'm a lot happier with that. It's just wider than that body all the way around. And then what I'm going to do is at the bottom of it, the part that's going to hang off the back of the fly, all I'm going to do is go in there and I'm going to round off those corners. Okay? So we're just trying to kind of create that little bit of a half moon shape off the back of this web material. I have tried to punch this out with a foam puncher, and it doesn't work super well. It doesn't give you quite the shape you'd expect it to give, and it doesn't want to cut all the way through it. So I have found the easiest way is to just round it off like so, just with my scissors. So now I'm going to come lay this down on top of my fly. I want it to extend, like I said, slightly out over the back of the body. So for here, I don't know if you can see through it, but it's just beyond the body. Not too much, but just enough that it's visible. And once I'm happy with where it's sitting, a little tug on it, there, I'm happy. I'm going to take, again, one loose collecting wrap, and we're going to stay right in that last segment that we created. 1, 2, and cinch it down. Okay, so it's sitting like so on top. And once it's on there, you look at it, that looks pretty realistic. It's a very realistic looking web or wing material. Then just go in and trim out what was hanging out over the top of the head. And now we're going to work on tying in our legs. So you're going to have two really long barred legs. They are overly long, but if we cut them in half, they'd be too short for each side. So we're going to tie one leg on each side, and we want it to sit right in the middle of where that split in the foam is. Okay? So I'm going to come over here. You can put a thread wrap on it, add one more, and then you can adjust it to where you want it. Make sure you got about equal amount of leg hanging off each side. Make sure it's snugged in there pretty good. Then I'm going to come over to the other side. I'm going to add in the leg onto the opposite side as well. So 1 wrap, 2 wrap, and then it's got enough tension from the bobbin hanging that I can just kind of move it around, adjust the lengths if I want to, and make sure that's snugged down. So I'm going to do one more thread wrap just to know that I've locked both sets of legs down. Pull pretty good so it's tight. And this is what I'm left with currently. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to complete the X on the segment that's directly behind where my thread is. So I'm going to pull, I'll do it on this one first, pull that back leg back, get a little bit of stretch on it, pull it back. I'll try to do this at the angle so you can see. I'm going to pull this leg back out of the way, cross my thread back over, and lock that thread into the segment directly behind it. Okay? So on top, it looks like you got an X, a completed X, and that's sitting there. While I'm holding that, I'm going to go and grab that other leg because I'm already in that other segment now, the second leg, and lock it in as well. Make sure that wing material stays centered. And now those legs should be sitting, again, right in the crease of that foam on either side. Pretty simple. Lock one in, lock the second one in. And now we're just imitating having 2 sections of legs come out. We just tied it in once. Okay? Now again, we're going to advance our thread back forward to that other to the front segment. So we want to do that same X across again. So we're making sure that we're not leaving any underbody changes. So now we want our thread to come back to that front segment. And this is where our deer hair is going to come in. Could I grab one of those patches? I'm not sure where it went. Yeah. Thank you. So when selecting your deer hair for this, we want a body hair, something that's going to flare for us. So we're not looking for a super thin hair. This one is pretty perfect. It's light in color. The tips have a change in color, which is kind of nice. You could go blonder. It would even look like we're just imitating another, like almost its legs and its wings standing up, the underside of them. It's going to be lighter in color and of some color. So you can kind of choose your color there. Yeah, I can already hear it. I want you to take the hair that you have cut off and stack it in your hair stacker. But equally as important as stacking your hair is cleaning it out. So make sure you get all that under fuzz that's in that hair pulled out of it. So I'm taking about a pencil width, maybe a smidge more, because I can always just pull some of it out if I don't want it. So I've got that hair like so. I'm going to grab the tips and grab your comb or whatever you have, or your fingers, and just clean it out. We want to pull all that under fuzz out. If we don't, it won't flare the way we want it to. So I'm just going in and cleaning it all out. Once I'm happy with that, it's actually at this point that I like to gauge. I have it in my hands. I like to gauge how much of that hair I'm going to use. So I don't want it, I'm going to keep all that hair right on top of the fly. I don't want it to go around the edges of the fly. So I don't want to have too much. Right now, I've got a little bit too much hair. So I'm going to pull it out. And again, this, guys, is something, it's a bit of an experimental process to know how much hair to use. I'm happy with about that much. So now I'm gonna stack my tips, my hair stacker. So as we've talked about before with our hair stacker is keeping it oriented in your hands the way that we want it to come out. So if I know that I want my tips to be at the back end of the fly, then I want to think about my hair stacker that now I know the tips are at the back end. So I want to, when I pull it out, I want to pull it out this direction so they're already lined up the way I want them. They go into my hands and I can tie them on. Okay? So I make sure it's stacked. When I pull my hair stacker apart, there's my tips. They're already in the direction I want them to go. Come in with my fingers, take them out so they're aligned. Any last minute cleaning? Okay. Lots of stacking going on. So when I'm gauging this now, I want to gauge that those hairs are right about at the back end of the fly, not that wing, the underwing, but right at the back of the fly, okay? So holding that there so I can gauge the length, I'm then gonna switch hands and grab the hair on the other side, and now I can see how much is sticking out in front of the fly. Pretty important piece here, guys, is I'm gonna run my scissors right up the edge of that foam of all that's hanging out in front and just trim it off. Okay? And now I still haven't moved my hand. Nothing's changed. I'm still holding in that place because I'm ready to tie it in right now. Okay? So I've already got it. I've already measured the length. I've trimmed it. Now I'm going to take one loose wrap. Again, you can forward clockwise, spin your bobbin. I got one wrap here. Now I've started the snug down, but you see I haven't pulled it all the way down. Using light pressure, I go around with a second one, pinch on top, keep that hair right on top of the fly, and pinch and flare. And you can see how that flare in the front, the hair in the front flared. I'm going to take a couple more wraps forward through that hair that flared, so I'm really locking it down. So we just don't want that hair to extend over the front of the fly. That's kind of what we're gaming for here. And now you look at it, I've got a little bit of hair sticking off one side of the profile of the fly, so I'm just going to go in there and trim it. Pretty simple, just don't cut your legs off. That'd be a real crummy time to do that. And it's locked in. We're really close to done here, guys. So now that we got that hair wing on top of our web wing, when we're trimming these legs, I want to pull that leg rearward without pulling tension on it. So I don't want to stretch it because that's going to change the length. It's going to retract itself once I cut it. So I want to pull no real tension on it. I'm going to cut it right at the back of where that web wing is. Trim it. Same thing with the other one. Without stretching it out, just get it taut and trim it. And now those front legs, we're gonna go about 3/4 of the length that we did the back ones. Okay? I don't know what they're saying over there, but it's not good. So there we go, guys. We've got our nice hair wing. We've trimmed those legs. So now the way those legs are going to sit in the water, one's a little bit longer. It's just really trying to imitate what that grasshopper's legs are going to look like. Yeah.
Did you cut your deer hair straight or on a taper?
I cut it on a taper. Yeah. So when I came up, like how I said, I'm going to use the profile of that foam with my scissors. So I came up like so with a little bit of a slight back angle, and I went snipped. So then when I gather them and I cinch, the ones up front are going to be pull up a little longer, and it's going to taper into that hair like so. Okay, guys, one added bonus here that I'm going to show you, because I don't think, in my opinion, that those fish can really see what's right here. But what is the most frustrating thing on the river is when you also can't see this on the water. Yeah, or if you've got clients on your boat and you're struggling to stare into the sun, and this makes it a little bit more visible. So an option here is to you could use like any kind of, this is just a parapost wing. You can use it for lots of different things. I'm just going to tie it in. Yeah, high-vis foam would be just the same. This might suck into that deer hair a little nicer than foam does, but same idea. Just giving myself something. So all I did is I'm aiming by the butts of that and keeping it right in the middle of that deer hair, centered on that fly. I take one wrap in, make a second, tighten it down. I'm going to leave it like so for a second. Let's go in and whip finish this fly, and we're going to whip finish right on that segment. Okay, that's right where we're going to finish this fly. So we'll come in, going through that deer hair. We're only going to maybe do 1 or 2 turns of this whip finish because we're going to glue it from the bottom where we got lots of access at it. Tighten it down. Snip out your thread. Now I'm going to come in and just trim this high-vis material, so I just got a post that I can see. You guys don't have this stuff in your package. I'm just showing you a second option. So now, by adding that, I've got a very visible top to that fly. It's going to make it so much easier to see on the water. But what we've attained is this awesome segmented tan-colored body because we're using tan foam, but obviously you could adjust that to whatever color, whether it's green or yellow. I've got that profile from that web wing, and I've got a little bit of an indicator with my hair wing on top. Really simple, Charlie Boy Hopper, such a killer pattern. Good on a lot of waters, but good on ours as well. You guys good? All right. Well, guys, that's all we have for you tonight as far as our flies are concerned. I want to take a second again to thank Bow River Brewing for allowing us to be down here. Thank you, guys. Really appreciate it. Let's give them a hand, guys. Thanks for letting us be here. It's awesome. We look forward to being back. We will be live again next Thursday. We'll keep you tuned as to where we will be located, and so you know where to come. Okay? Again, my name is Tim Hepworth with Fly Fishing Bow River Outfitters. Thanks for tuning in at home, guys, and we will see you next week. Thanks so much.